FM23 is right around the corner, and a few days ago I released a video with my personal wish list of what I want to see in the new game. On that video I asked you guys what you want to see in FM23, and you guys left over 150 comments. I've whittled them down to the best comments, and today we're going to go through your wish list. If you are thinking of getting FM23, you can get it for cheaper than Steam via my affiliate link with Fanatical down in the description. But suggestion number one comes from Flabby over Sweden. He wants to see women's teams and national teams in the game. Now, it is coming, but not for FM23. I think it's been confirmed it's not going to be in FM23, but I will update you on the news as and when it comes out. If you do want to keep up to date with all of the latest FM23 news though, make sure you do subscribe to the channel and turn notifications on. If you want to keep up to date with all the latest football news around the world, then download the One Football app, the best app out there for all the latest football news, scores and updates from around the world. And now you can even watch live matches on there. For me, it is the best football app out there, and it's only been made better with the addition of live matches on there. So if you want to download it from the top line of the description for absolutely free, it really helps me and the channel out. The next suggestion comes from a username that I cannot pronounce. I mean, it might just be a fancy font, but I have no idea what it's trying to say. But he's left 4 comments on there, which is great. We'll go through them one by one, starting off with the ability to manage under 23s, which I think would be a great addition to the game. Obviously, it would make it a lot more in depth, and a lot of managers these days start their life off with the under 18s, under 23s before moving up. I mean, I'm a Lincoln City fan. We've got Mark Kennedy in charge right now, and I believe he started off managing youth teams before eventually going to be the assistant manager at Birmingham and now the main man at Lincoln City. To play devil's advocate though, in order to add all of these under 23 competitions to the game, it would slow things down quite a lot because you've got to load in a whole more load of league data, and that could be a little bit tricky, particularly with people with slower computers. It would slow the game right down. So there's pros and cons, but ultimately it would be really cool. Number 2, more in-depth scout reports and analytics, which I think would be a really good idea and easy enough to implement into the game. These days scouts are looking for all sorts, and there are suggestions in the comments, things like pressures, carries, expected goals on target for goalkeeper assessment, and the passes per defensive action. It would add an awful lot more depth to the game, I'm sure, but it's also one of those things where if you don't want to focus on it or you're not bothered by it, you can just completely ignore it and play the game without it, and it's absolutely fine. Number 3, the possibility of players going on strike. I'll be honest, I'm not too keen on that. I mean, imagine you've got a Champions League final coming up and your players decide to go on strike. I think it would just result in you being sacked, basically. It's a cool idea, but I don't think it would actually add all that much to the game. And finally, set-piece coaches. Completely agree. It's a natural thing in the game now, where I think Liverpool have got the throwing coaches. I know Wimbledon have got a substitute coach, which is actually quite a cool idea. So yeah, why not get them in? Next up is Matt, who suggests a big overhaul for international management, and this comment actually got the most likes on the previous video as well. So clearly you guys really want to see an overhaul of international management just in time for the World Cup. Now, I personally haven't played any international management probably since the last World Cup, if I'm honest with you. I was unaware you can actually do any training, and the staff interactions are pretty limited. So really an overhaul is probably needed, and I think for a World Cup it's the right time to do it. I love the idea of having an infrastructure budget and being able to decide to spend more on medical, training, scouting or youth facilities. Now, to an extent you can do this by only asking the board for youth improvements and things like that, but I know in real life managers do have a big impact on the training facilities and what they want to see. Now obviously this would mean a bit more in-depth training facilities or youth facilities being added to the game as well, rather than just being an arbitrary number between 1 and 20, 1-star or 5-star. So that might need a bit of an overhaul as well if this is to be implemented into the game. But I fully know that at Lincoln City, when the Cowleys were in charge and they got the new facilities being built, they had a big say in what they wanted to see at the facilities. So managers do have a big part in this. What they don't have a big part in is stadium design. A lot of you guys keep saying, I want to have a stadium design like in the game. That won't happen, I don't think. As cool as it would be, I agree it'd be really cool to do it, it's never going to get added to the game. Kevin also says when we're successful in a country, the TV rights and sponsorship deals should develop. And they do develop, just very slowly, to try and keep it in line with real life. However, because I think most people play an FM save over the course of 10 seasons at most, and it might take 25 seasons for there to be a big increase in sponsorship deals, no one really sees that. I think what FM needs to do is potentially make it more unrealistic but condense that period of time where sponsorship deals can massively increase. That way, I think it keeps people a little bit more engaged and they can see some physical progress each and every season that's not just £1 million here or there. They can see like a £10 million increase. Yes, it might not be quite so realistic, but it's a game we're playing and we want the game to be fun, and I think that might just keep people a bit more engaged. Nicola's come in with 8 suggestions, so I'm only going to pick out a couple of these ones, but the first one is more leagues in Africa and Asia. Yes, we need to get more licensed leagues across the world, and Africa and Asia is a good part for that. I think it's just South Africa that's licensed, or even just available to play at the base level of the game in FM22. Now, obviously, you can download modded packs for leagues and different things like that, so you can download the Nigerian league if you wanted to, but it would be nice to see them actually in the game at the start as a fully working database. I think there needs to be some more representation there. I would also argue that the new role of wide centre midfielder is essentially a Carrilero anyway, but I'm all for new roles in the game. So if you guys can think of any new roles that could be added to the game, let me know in the comments. And I think Nicola is a bit of a sadist because he's got punishments for players, not the code of conduct, but as an example, if your team play a bad game, you can punish them in training. Remind me not to sign for your team, please, because that sounds terrifying. Brady's come in with some nice changes that actually could save you a bit of time in the game and make you more likely to do things as well. He says, for example, what you should do is be able to praise the entire team or a bunch of players that perform well in training, as well as criticising a group of players, rather than doing it all individually. And this makes a lot of sense. You know, why not? Just get them all together and say, well done, you've trained well this week, or lads, you've not trained well this week, can you do better next week, please? It makes a lot of sense. I think there's a lot of interactions in the game that could be groups like this and be a lot simpler. Now, Cicero comes in asking for stadium customization, which I did say earlier isn't going to happen, I don't think, ever, basically, in Football Manager. It'd be cool, but I can't see it happening. What I do like, though, is sponsorship management. In my wishlist video, I did talk about having a little bit more freedom over commercial aspects of the club. I think that'd be really cool to bring in, as well as social media for players. Not as in they're actually posting on social media, but you can see on each individual player, and it says something like, this player's got 1 million followers, and they've got really good marketing reach, which means you're going to make more money at the club. I think having that in the game would be great as well, to try and just bring the commercial side of the game a little bit further forward. Adam Spimbley says he wants to see a chairman mode, and this is a really, really big feature that gets requested every single year. But I think essentially you're asking for a brand new game. I think like Chairman Manager or what would even be called? Football Chairman Simulator 2023, maybe. I think it's a whole different game. I think it's just completely different. And yes, it would be cool to have a fully functioning FM in-depth version of a football chairman style game. There are apps you can download on the App Store that basically do this as well, but they're very simple in their nature. Having a full game like this would actually be really cool. Tal's come in with a really, really good comment, and he's asking for a whole overhaul of the medical facilities, which I think is a really good idea, because currently it's basically just based on the physio and how good each individual physio and your sports science team are. Clubs invest a ton of money into their medical facilities. At the non-league level, you're literally just looking at a physio's bench where they just massage them and, I don't know, look at their legs or something like that. I don't know what physios do really, but at the top level of football, like Man City or Arsenal, like you've seen on the recent All or Nothing documentaries, they are basically like hospitals that they've got. So having, maybe it's just as simple as having a medical facilities alongside the training and youth facilities. At the very basic level, 1-star facilities are that physio bench, 20 is the cryo chamber recovery systems that they all have in the Premier League and things like that. That might be a way to implement it a little bit. And so the higher your facilities are, the less, not less frequent your injuries could be, but that might be a part of it, as well as your sports science team develop as well. But it would mean quicker recovery for your players and better rehab for your players and less likely to get reoccurring injuries, I would imagine. I really like that idea though, and I think it could be really fleshed out massively, so let me know what you think down in the comments. Next up, we have a comment from fan of Lando Norris, who wants to see an improvement to the youth intake system. He finds it really upsetting that you get great reports come through once a year, and then suddenly the youth intake comes in and it's absolutely terrible. He'd prefer less players, but them coming through more frequently. And I think the more frequently won't happen, because I think it is pretty true to life that they have a yearly intake coming through of scholars that come through the club and they get given contracts or not, so that stays true to real life to an extent. But I do like the idea of having maybe a monthly report coming through on your youth intake rather than just getting it at one point at a random part of the season. Maybe if you had an update every single month saying, okay, this player's trained well, their potential could actually be increased a little bit here. And potentially if you had some specific junior coaches at the club that you could actually sign to your club to actually improve this a little bit, that would be a good way to maybe go about making the youth intake a little bit more exciting and a little bit more engaging, particularly if you have a poor youth intake. You can actually do something a little bit more about it maybe. Next up, we have a comment from Pitohoy, which I think I've probably butchered massively. I mean, if you think I'm bad at pronouncing names in Football Manager, I'm even worse at usernames. If you watch my Twitch streams, you'll know this for sure. I can't pronounce usernames. But a small and insignificant thing I want is to be able to view the full table after X amount of games played. Yes, I love this idea. Sometimes I really want to go back and see the meteoric rise that I have had. At some point, I may have won the league title on the final day of the season, where 10 game weeks before, I was like 10 points off. So I'd love to be able to go back and look at the table from 10 game weeks ago to actually look at the table and see what sort of effect and impact I had on the team to get to the top of the table. Just that'd be so cool to see. I also like the extension of this as well, like looking at the table if only goals scored after a certain amount of minutes, for example, and other sort of ideas like that. I think that'd be quite cool to see in the game. And I think it would certainly be something that you could add into the data hub, which I think is a bit underused by a lot of players. Frederick's come in with a really long comment, so we're going to focus on a little bit of it, but I do like the one that says almost all interactions in the game need an update, and I completely agree. I think things have got a little bit stale, and essentially you can just say the same things over and over again and it's fine. With my stream save on Venezia, every time a player asks me for a new contract, I just say the club can't afford it, and every single time, without fail, other than Adam Holozek, who just gets a bit angry at me, they just accept it. They're absolutely fine with that argument, and I'd like to see a little bit more options and diversity in the responses and what you can say to players. But I did touch on interactions in my own personal wish list, so if you haven't seen that, you can check that one out just here on the stream for you to go and watch. But if you have watched that, you can keep it with all the latest Football Manager news with this video up here.